In response to the question, why are people gay, I respond, why are people straight? When they say reproduction and pair bonding, I reply, attraction isn't required for procreation or family commitment. That was Dr. Lindsay Doe, a clinical human sexologist. She asked the question scholars have been hypothesizing answers to since before psychology existed as a field of study. Why are people gay? The textbook Discovering Psychology in Modules covers the work of Simon LeVay in 1991, where he recognized the differences in the structure of the hypothalamus between gay and straight subjects. The text also highlights the traits common in non heterosexual individuals and the possible genetic and prenatal influences which may correlate to these differences. However, there is a rich history of hypotheses on sexual orientation. These theories have often reflected the popular beliefs in psychology at the time of their publication. What follows is a brief history of sexual orientation hypotheses. Before we begin, it is noted that not all sexual orientation hypotheses have been included in this presentation, and that this does not attempt to assume or lay claim to the origin of anyone's sexuality. But let us begin in 1864. Karl Heinrich Ulrich hypothesized that homosexuality is a gender variation. An Urning is a heterosexual female soul in a male body. In 1896, Magnus Hirschfeld hypothesized that we're all born bisexual embryos and we mature towards heterosexuality. Variants to heterosexuality were a product of impairments like alcoholism or accommodations like exceptional upbringing. In 1903, Hirschfeld changed his hypothesis that sexuality is on a continuum, and homosexuality is where a male and female physical features begin to overlap. He suggested that we look for sperm in lesbians' vaginal fluid and menstrual blood in gay men's semen. In 1903, similar to Hirschfeld, Sigmund Freud hypothesized that we are all born bisexual embryos and we mature towards heterosexuality. Environmental impairments can lead to an inverted instinct, or an inversion, Freud's word for homosexuality. In attempting to apply this in therapy, Freud himself observed that trying to turn someone straight was as ineffective as it was to try and turn a heterosexual gay. In 1917, Eugen Steinack hypothesized that the gonads of homosexuals were physiologically different than those of heterosexuals, and homosexuality could be cured by transplanting a straight man's testes into a gay man's scrotum. This later was proved to be absolutely inaccurate. In 1934, Carl Jung proposed that sexuality is defined by archetypes, with males having a female archetype in their psyche called anima, and females having a male archetype called animus. This balances our interactions with the world, and how well we balance determines whether we are attracted to the opposite or same sexes. In 1940, Sandor Radot claimed that homosexuality isn't genetic, rather it's a phobia to people of another biological sex. Evelyn Hooker in 1957 contradicted this, saying that no matter its cause, homosexuality is a naturally occurring human variation. In 1959, G. Evelyn Hutchinson hypothesized that homosexuality is genetically possible due to a heterozygous advantage. An organism with a gay allele and a straight allele will be more healthy, more genetically diverse, and more likely to pass on the gay trait. In 1962, Irving Bieber opposed the Born With It stance, claiming that homosexuality occurred before puberty from a strong connection to one's mother or a weak connection to one's father. In 1978, Frederick Whittam deduced that if children were raised to be heterosexual, yet some remained homosexual, then sexual orientation must be biological. Also in 1978, Edward Wilson claimed that homosexual genes are in an entire family. The homosexual individual may not pass these genes on, but then they are available to help rear their siblings' offspring, which attributes to higher success in their survival and passing their genes on through them. In 1991, J. Michael Bailey and Richard Pillard claimed that it's a polygenic trait. Sexual orientation is determined by multiple genetic mechanisms. In 1991, Simon LeVay strengthened this position, claiming that sexual orientation is biological when observed consistent differences in the structure of the hypothalamus between homosexual and heterosexual men. In 1993, Dean Hammer surveyed 76 gay brothers and found that there are significantly more gay relatives on the maternal side than the paternal side of their families, suggesting the gay gene was X-linked. Specifically, XQ28 became the known locus as the gay gene. In 1999, Paul Ewald proposed that homosexuality was a product of a viral or bacterial infection. In the year 2000, Daryl Bem proposed that exotic becomes erotic and that genes don't determine sexuality, but they do determine temperament. If a girl has a genetically predisposed masculine temperament, she will grow up separate from other girls and will develop physiological arousal to them later in life because they are exotic and therefore erotic. In 2001, Anthony Boggart and Ray Blanchard conducted a study which found that each additional older brother increases the chance of homosexuality by 33%. Every time a male child is conceived in the mother's body, it detects a signal from the Y chromosome in the form of HY antigens, which the mother's body produces antibodies to in response. The rise of antibodies in the mother's bloodstream lowers the chances of producing offspring which will reproduce in the future. In 2004, Andrea Campiero-Chiani claimed that homosexuality was an antagonistic pleiotropy, a gene which affects multiple traits in both harmful and beneficial ways. In the case of homosexuality, reproduction is impaired, but the reproductivity of relatives is improved. In 2004, Charles Roselli conducted a study based off of the observation that 7 to 11% of rams, male sheep, are gay. In a comparative study of heterosexual ram's brains to homosexual ram's brains, they noted that the gay brains had a significantly smaller hypothalamus, suggesting the biological correlation between same sex attraction and anatomy of the hypothalamus. In 2008, Frank Muscarella hypothesized that homosexuality was intended to reduce male male aggression, leading to a safer and more supportive environment to rear offspring in. Also in 2008, Lisa Diamond noted that women are more likely to be sexually fluid, yet her results were somewhat confounded by the fact that most of the existing studies on homosexuality had been conducted with males only. She concluded that for women, sexuality was more fluid and dynamic over time, with homosexuality as a naturally occurring state. In 2010, Ivanka Savic found that testosterone surges in early development determine genital development, and in later prenatal development, they help determine gendered brain anatomy. The basis of homosexuality is therefore complex and varies throughout biological development. In 2014, Tuxie Gunn and Eric Villain hypothesized that we have a network of genes for sexual orientations, and epigenetics determines the expression of those genes without changing the DNA to suit the needs of the environment of the individual. Most recently, in 2014, researcher and professor at St. Petersburg State University, Eugene Dieve, radically proposed that the development of sexual orientation occurs similarly to the development of biological sex, likely occurring during the same stages of development and with similar genetic trait formation. Modern attitudes on sexuality are constantly evolving and often reflect the trends in the field of psychology at the time. The early 1900 hypotheses reflect Freud's psychoanalytic view that homosexuality was a product of upbringing and childhood trauma. Modern theories show more attention to the biological factors, such as the interaction between environment and genetics, which produces a trait for sexual orientation. To conclude, I wanted to ask fellow members of the LGBT+ community to describe their sexuality and how they believe it came to be. Please note that all of the following subjects interviewed gave their consent to have their audio put into this production. Also note that some responses have been edited for length or clarity.
I think people are bi because we are living in an age where we don't really have to put sexual limits on ourselves anymore, and anyone can be open to anything.
I don't know why, but I think it's like natural for us to be attracted to like different individuals, you know?
I think people are straight because being straight is what they were taught to believe is the only right way people can live.
I think in terms of genetics, I think that the line is very set in terms of like someone may have the genes that predispose them to just being gay or you know, like a lesbian or, you know, gay, or bisexual. But especially in the more social factors, I believe that these lines are oftentimes a lot more open at that point as opposed to the genetic factors. But I mean, ultimately, there's no real way to tell. And you know, I mean, it's all subject to change, and it's all fluid. Everything is fluid in terms of sexuality and gender.
People are gay because it's in their souls. Like your soul is a specific sexuality, and that's why you are the way you are. It has nothing to do with your body, which is why the thought of trans people come up, because their soul is a female or their soul is a male or their soul is non-binary, not their body.
Well, I think I was meant to be this way, and I think I was always meant to be lesbian, and I think I could not live any other life. So, in the immortal words of Lady Gaga, baby, I was born this way.
Sexual orientation is central to an individual's identity. As science progresses and we gain more insights to the biological factors that determine our psychology, we grow closer to understanding the phenomenon behind what is most important to who we are.